Hello, everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to this conference on off-grid solar systems towards sustainable and scalable business models that is co-hosted by GOGLA and the African School of Regulation with the collaboration of the African Development Bank, the African Forum of Utility Regulators, SMAP of the World Bank Group, IRENA, and Sustainable Energy for All. Thank you for joining us today. I am Ignacio Pérez-Arriaga, the Interim Director of the African School of Regulation. This is the fourth ASR virtual conference in this format of 3 days of online debates, with the first day devoted to examining in depth the situation of the topic of the conference, the second day looking at regulatory approaches to improve the situation, and the third one taking stock what the contributions of the previous couple of days and looking for an action plan or the next thing to do. The previous ones were on concessions, business models for distribution, sustainable and scalable business models for mini-grids, regional power trade. And our goal with this conference is to understand, to analyze a topic in depth, offering the knowledge for free to the community of the energy sector professionals, and at the same time to create the body of knowledge to learn from you for what we will have to use in our capacity building activities at the African School of Regulation. The format of all the panels that we will have during these 3 days will be based on discussion without formal PowerPoint presentations. But we shall start this first session with 3 presentations. The first one will be some welcoming words by Damilola Ogunbiyi, the CEO of Sustainable Energy for All and former director of the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria. And that will be followed by 2 brief introductory presentations that will help to set the scene and the terminology for the rest of the conference. The first one will be by Koen Peters, Executive Director of the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, GOGLA, and the second one by me. So with that, we will listen to Damilola Ogunbiyi. Colleagues.
Friends, esteemed partners, and distinguished guests, I'm honored to join you today at this off-grid solar systems conference organized by the African School of Regulation and the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, GOGLA, where the sustainability and scalability of standalone energy systems will be discussed. On behalf of Sustainable Energy for All, a formal collaborator of this event, I extend my warmest welcome to all of you. Off-grid renewable energy solutions presents a viable electrification solution that is rapidly scalable, environmentally sustainable, and has the potential to empower rural communities, especially youth and women. Indeed, off-grid renewable energy solutions have a critical role to play if we are to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 7, access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. It is estimated that by 2030, renewable energy sources will power over 60% of all new electricity access, and standalone and mini-grid systems will provide the means for almost half of new access. I want to emphasize enough that where rural and remote communities gain access to off-grid renewable energy, the impact of these underserved populations can be profound and transformational. For reducing indoor air pollution to providing new ways to earn a living, such as through agro-processing and small-scale manufacturing. Furthermore, off-grid renewable energy solutions play a critical role in supporting education and healthcare by providing cost-effective electrification for schools and health centers, and helping provide cold storage for critical health supplies such as vaccines. We must therefore find ways to ensure that we scale these off-grid solutions and make them even more affordable for end users. Ladies and gentlemen, tremendous progress has been made in recent years. Technology costs have significantly reduced, innovation in delivery models and financing has picked up, and a more diverse set of stakeholders, including communities, local entrepreneurs, and the private sector, have become engaged in the sector. To support further scale up in off-grid renewables, I'd want to highlight 3 critical areas. First, the technology innovation process needs to be strengthened. We must ensure the solutions that are created fit local conditions and end uses. The development of fit-for-purpose solutions will ensure greater scalability while meeting the unique needs of the bottom of the pyramid users. Secondly, we must increase financing to the sector. Capital flows into the sector have grown considerably over the last 7 years. For example, 211 million of public funding has been dispersed in the sector through resource-based financing since 2013. However, there is still a long way to go from off-grid renewables sector to achieve its full potential. Both public and private sources of financing have an important role to play in bridging the financing gap. And there's a growing evidence that blended finance arrangements can transform the sector. Third, creating an enabling environment is crucial if off-grid renewable solutions are to reach untapped markets. I am particularly pleased that in many countries are increasingly mainstreaming off-grid renewable energy solutions with national energy access strategies. However, to ensure lasting success, electrification planning and strategies should clearly identify those areas of the country that will be reached by grid extension, as well as suitable for off-grid solutions. These holistic and integrated energy access strategies must be backed by dedicated policies and regulations designed for different off-grid solutions, such as mini-grids and standalone systems. In closing, I would like to emphasize that we still have a significant number of people who lack access to electricity, and over 2.3 billion people without access to clean cooking solutions. We must all come together to ensure that we can create actionable solutions that would ensure that we do not leave the underserved people behind. I wish you a productive conference, and I look forward to the stimulating discussions and fruitful outcomes that will undoubtedly emerge from this gathering. Thank you for listening.
Now, Koen Peters, Executive Director of GOGLA, will make his introduction.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. I just want to quickly check whether my screen is visible.
Yes.
Nodding, thank you very much. Yes, Ignacio, thank you very much and welcome everybody. It's a great honor to be part of this fourth session, this fourth 3-day conference of the Africa School of Regulation. As Damilola just said, there's hundreds of millions of people for whom energy access is not a given. We are the industry segment, the energy sector that is going to focus focusing in particularly on that part of the market, the people that are not automatically granted access to unlimited power from the grid, and for which we have alternative solutions. Let me quickly run through the agenda. I'd like to talk a little bit about what GOGLA is. I'd like to give you a lot of information about where the market currently sits and where in terms of sales and impact and in terms of investment, so that you have an interpretation and an idea of the numbers and the scale of the market that we're talking about. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about different approaches of different market countries, what we've seen in the past and what works in different business models. And finally, talking about our goal of reaching 1 billion people by 2030. GOGLA, we are the industry association for the off-grid solar energy industry. We've got around 200 members, including manufacturers, distributors, service providers, associate members, including investors, associations. And they're truly global, spread out across the globe. We started off as an industry association that was focusing particularly on solar lanterns, then solar lanterns and solar home systems, but increasingly looking at the appliances that come with solar home systems, standalone appliances such as solar water pumps and solar refrigeration. And now our members are playing a vital role in powering homes and enterprises with a multitude of functions. Over 100 million people have been reached by the members of GOGLA so far. That is a market that has been growing steadily since 2016, with a bit of a bump due to COVID, but has been picking up again since then. So this is from 2016 to 2022. This market more or less started with significant numbers from 2012 onwards, when there was the arrival of white LED lighting, but it's building on a long history, decades really, of people that have been trying to sell off-grid solar solutions to rural and poor communities, but really getting a bump with the arrival of white LED lighting. What we can say is that in our market of small systems, the smaller systems still sell in the biggest numbers. Lanterns are clocking about 4 million, close to 4 million products a year, whereas small multi-light systems, where you have a small panel, might be a 3 to 5 or 10 watts panel, a small battery, and up to 3-4 lights, up to just over a million products a year being sold right now. And larger solar home systems having grown faster and have now surpassed the multi-light system market. So I mentioned that white LED light was one thing that pushed our market in 2012. With white LED lighting, that manufacturers were able to package meaningful amounts of service light into much smaller systems with smaller batteries, smaller solar panels, and making far more affordable products that could still provide very meaningful services to its users. Over time, as I'm sure you will all know, solar panels have come down in prices, battery have improved in performance, have come down in prices. But what also happened in our market is a connection with mobile banking and with remote technology, mobile technology through GSM chips, in which solar home systems could be switched on and off remotely. That allowed players in our market to offer products on a pay-as-you-go solution, meaning people would get a system against a small deposit, take it home, and then pay it off over time, where in remote technology would switch off the system if the household or the business hadn't paid off for their weeks or months dues, and switch it on again once they continue to pay. We call this model the pay-go approach, and as you see, the pay-go model has significantly grown over the years, more so than the cash market, and is now more or less coming on par in that in numbers. I should mention these numbers are numbers from GOGLA affiliates, GOGLA members and companies through our partners that report sales. We reckon that the total market is about 4 to 5 times as much as the market that is reported by these numbers. When you look at the value of market, you see that the cash-only market has been growing, but has in terms of total value of products is much smaller, because they tend to be focusing on smaller products, whereas pay-go is particularly suitable for products that are more expensive and surpass the ability of a household or business to pay for it at once. And so they use the pay-go as the financing solution to afford that products. And as a result, we are talking about a market that is significantly more sizable in terms of value as you see here, approaching $500 million per year as market size. The market on itself has reached 101 million people served through our members, through affiliates, so close to 450 for the market in total. These products have generated savings for households in the order of 13.5 billion. That's primarily on savings from kerosene that they need to purchase to power lights or batteries for their torches, or going downtown to have their phone charged. It also has generated 7.4 billion in additional revenues for end users when people have used a solar home system or the system to provide services to their communities, such as phone charging, setting up a cinema, improving the workable hours in their shop, working in evenings as a seamstress. These kind of livelihood approaches have generated meaningful additional income for end users. And altogether, we've supported through our members 2.6 million, and of course have also made a sizable dent in the emissions of carbon dioxide. This is how one of our members, customers, has been quoted about talking about their impact. When we look at the market where it's heading right now, in terms of key developments, we see that the PAYGO approach is now being taken to other technologies such as smartphones, motorbikes, and cook stoves, where our industry has broken new ground for these products as well, to make it more affordable to larger groups of customers. We see that companies are offering broader range of products, particularly going into larger systems with alternatives for diesel and gasoline generators through solar powered solutions and power backup systems for people that are on a weak grid situation. We see a lot of innovation happening around productive use of energy, particularly in agriculture for irrigation and cooling, agro processing, but also for other kinds of micro enterprises. There is a lot of push of products into the commercial and industrial scale, and in electrifying public facilities such as clinics, schools, public administration buildings. As an industry association, we're focusing on the lower end of these systems. The kilowatt range, when we're talking about tens of kilowatts or hundreds or even megawatts, that's probably a different market segment. Those are not really our members anymore. And we see that many of our members are also using the PAYGO empowered solar home systems that households have obtained as assets against which they can provide financial services such as cash loans and insurance. A whole dynamic market evolving there. If we look at that particular focus on productive use, we should say that this market is still in an early stage of development, showing lots of promise and potential of helping livelihoods improve, helping agriculture improve, and farmers as well as other small enterprises and public facilities. So we've registered 32 million worth of productive use focused investment deals among our members, 7.4 thousand refrigeration units and 24,000 solar water pumps sold in 2022. Let me look at the investment. Back on the success of this market, we've also seen grown investment in our market. 2022 being a particularly strong year in which close to 750 million was raised for the industry as a whole. Nigeria showing some good growth. These are some sector headlines. And if you see that in a graph here, you will notice that we've had a number of stagnating years behind us until the COVID years. After that, after bouncing back from COVID, the industry has turned the corner and is scaling up and attracting new levels of investment. At least that's how it's been looking so far. If you look at how that investment is allocated to different sizes of companies, however, we need to also conclude that we are talking about a very small number of companies that are successful in scaling up, and a long range of companies that are struggling to obtain finance and grow further. So really, the majority of investment is going to a handful of companies that are succeeding in scaling up. Some of them have reached a level of profitability, but not all. And as a whole, our market is still very much starved of investment. And if we look at what is one of the main inhibitors of our market, the large majority of our members would put access to finance clearly as the #1 barrier towards growth of this market. Let me continue and zooming in a little bit on how different countries have progressed along time in growing their market. When GOGLA started over 10 years ago, India was one of the largest markets and was clearly the largest market in terms of number of products sold. That has declined as India has made significant steps in electrification of the country as a whole, and we see that back in the number of products sold. That does not mean that India is now gone as a market for the off-grid solar industry, because we see a newly emerging market here as for off-grid solar technology to support people that are in a weak grid situation with power backup solutions, or with solar rooftop to reduce the amount of power that businesses and households want to take off from the grid. And also for standalone solutions where the grid doesn't reach, for instance, in agricultural areas, and for solar water pumping in the fields. That's a sizable market that we don't see in these numbers here. The Indian market is interesting in the sense that the government has taken such a strong lead in the push for electrification, with industry primarily pushed into a role of a supplier of technology for the government, responding to government procurement for subsidized distribution schemes. This means that the Indian government has made big steps, but it has also been a cost-intensive way of reaching electrification that is not going to be easily replicable to many African states, and also hasn't really led to a very strong and organized industry that can support the government in delivering public goals. Now, if we look at the other success story, Kenya has been always the #2, but increasingly since the last few years, the #1 in terms of product sales. We also see that it has kind of hit the ceiling. The Kenyan market has built on decades of support from the Kenyan government for off-grid solar as a technology to serve public interests. With the Kenyan government creating measures such as VAT and import duty exemptions, working with the industry around quality control measures, and generally be very supportive towards international investment and investment in general. And with that strong support for doing business, Kenya has grown a fairly strong but also fairly commercial market for off-grid solar, with many players. I think there's close to 24 off-grid solar industry players in that country, who are also competing fairly strongly with each other, and have not really reached everywhere in the country in rural and remote areas, as their model is fairly commercial and seem to have hit a ceiling right now. And then the third example that I've put up here is Nigeria. Nigeria is quickly emerging as the second Kenya of Nigeria, shown steep growth in 3 years that are shown here on this graph. part of that in thanks to strong support from the Nigerian government for off-grid solar in its electrification plans, but a major ingredient also being a large World Bank funded program that enabled result-based financing to subsidize systems for certain categories of end users. And with those subsidies, the market has been able to get certainty about its investment opportunities in the country, has been able to invest more in the country, and has shown quick growth into sales. The Nigerian market is also interesting because it's hit a wall in 2022 as it ran out of funding for the subsidy, and we've clearly seen that in the sales numbers from our members in Nigeria, where the individual sales results showed quick pickup when the subsidy came on stream, a further pickup when the subsidy was increased, when the Nigerian government was concerned that the targets were not going to be achieved. We think that was a premature conclusion. And then it hit a wall as they ran out of funding. That funding will be renewed and it will be addressed, but it goes to demonstrate that with well-targeted interventions, you can speed up the market very significantly, but it's tricky, and there's a lot of devil in the detail and things that can go wrong if you don't get all the details correct. It's a complex approach to manage. We see these kind of approaches in Nigeria increasing. There's around 211 million that was disbursed through result-based financing since 2013, of which 100 million came on stream since 2020. There's many more in the pipeline. The World Bank, I think, is clearly taking here the lead in the biggest number of and the biggest scale of funding. But for instance, also donor-funded programs like the Beyond the Grid Fund Africa, with funding from Nordic players, energizing development from other European players, USAID. They've all contributed to result-based financing schemes that have helped to advance the market. I talked about some graphs in Nigeria of how those markets have picked up with result-based financing. Here's some examples. Please note the difference in scale between Nigeria and Mozambique and Madagascar. But I think the message is quite telling of what you can achieve with such a subsidy scheme. So where do we want to head? GOGLA's message is that we should aim for 1 billion people reached electrified by off-grid solar solutions by 2030, if we are serious about delivering Sustainable Development Goal 7, which talks about universal energy access for everyone. If we want to break that down, that 1 billion people, we say, well, GOGLA has always been focusing on entry-level electrification to people that don't have access yet. That will continue to be our bread and butter. 550 million people that we think we should be able to reach by between now and 2030. But we're also focusing on people that use off-grid solutions that have some electricity access but want to improve their quality of services. For instance, to power their own jobs and livelihoods. So we're focusing on 260 million people that we help to escalate the energy ladder, and 190 million people that would benefit from productive use of renewable energy services. How to do that? Reach the remaining unconnected. That's going to be harder with every 100 million that we target, because they are going to get poorer and more remote and sit in less developed markets. We are making sure that those that want to scale up on the energy ladder remain in touch with their suppliers and continue to be served and could be able to trade up in their products. We're focusing on backup solar solutions in the weak grid environments, and focusing on improving the products, the consumer protection, the credit risk management, and the whole service experience for consumers. So as an industry association, we focus on three things, basically: to improve, to promote the market, safeguard the market, and convene the market. What we do is we concentrate on three outcome areas, 3 areas of work: policy and regulation, access to finance, and the performance of the industry on itself. As the off-grid solar industry emerges, for me, as the example in Nigeria with the result-based financing scheme shows, we're on a path towards developing a, I think, unique, but certainly innovative and attractive public-private partnership model that I don't really see emerging in other industries in the same way, with the same balance of effort required from both the public sector and the private sector to deliver public goals. So we focus very much on influencing policies and programs, advising governments, and those that advise governments, working with them and trying to align on what guidance do we give to governments on how to create the proper enabling environment for the industry. And Ignacio is going to talk about that.
Koen, I think that you have to wrap up.
Yes, and I'll, if you give me 2 more minutes, then I'll wrap up so that you can continue that story about that the regulation. We convene the industry, we facilitate connections, we organize industry-leading expos, we create market information, we work on industry standards, and we work together with the whole world in order to deliver our goals, because we need to do this together. So I'll leave you with this quote, and Ignacio, I'm going to hand it back. Sorry if I stepped over time, but I hope this was a helpful scene setter of where we stand as an industry.
No problem. It was a great presentation, and that helps me for the next one. Well, hello everyone again. I am Ignacio Pérez-Arriaga, and the Interim Director of the African School of Regulation. Let me start by introducing the African School of Regulation for those of you that still don't know who we are. Well, okay. So we are an institution for capacity building that we try to provide the training and the policy dialogues and body of knowledge that Africa needs to meet the objectives of the Agenda 2063. Well, the General Secretary of the United Nations a few days ago in New York said that the rescue plan for the people and the planet is urgently needed, and access to electricity is one of the ingredients. Our response to that is that we try with our ambitious initiative to use the powerful influence of policy and regulation in energy and climate change, and to build the capacity, the human capital that the Africa energy sector needs to enable the goals of sustainable development in the continent. So my presentation will focus on these 2 words that we have in the title of the conference, how to achieve a sustainable and scalable business model for off-grid solar systems. And I think that it's important to get the terminology straight from the very beginning. So we are talking about sustainability and scalability. Okay, so by sustainability, what we mean is that the business models that could be tried, and some of them have been mentioned by Koen before, on OGS systems, should be able to remain operational, supplying a given community for any amount of time. And that sustainability is necessary, that applies both to the company perspective, so the company should be able to provide that service on a continuous basis, and the governmental perspective. So the government should be able to get the funding that is needed, the support, the regulation to make this possible. And scalability means that all the amount of people that should be supplied electricity with OGS systems, and Koen has been presenting the large amount that is needed, that all of them should be able, the business models to deploy in a territory, in a country, according to some electrification plan that determines that this is what should be provided with solar systems, all of them. And this is essential because we cannot say that we have universal access to electricity if the business models that to supply electricity are not sustainable. If every so often people have to start again from square zero. And all the OGS systems that are needed in Africa should be, these business models should be able to supply all of them, not only a fraction that is able to pay for them, but also those that need to be subsidized, that need to be helped to obtain their electricity supply. And sustainability, I think that it is clear that it's a precondition for scalability. All the funding that we will see in a moment that is needed to provide all these OGS systems will not come if the investors don't see that the model is a sustainable one. So let's try to frame the problem and understanding the challenge that Koen has been presented before, how to reach this 1 billion plus people that need to be electrified with OGS systems. The estimated contribution of the OGS sector is what Koen has been presented before, a certain amount, $500 million of current, I mean, there are some current users. Some of them have just solar lanterns. They are even below tier 1, and they need to be upgraded to tier 1 or more. Then there is a number of new primary connections that you have here, about $500 million. Then we have the people that are connected to the grid, but the reliability, the connection is very poor, and they need to back up with solar home systems. And in total, we have this amount of total users. This is for the entire population, but of which 82% live in Africa. So the numbers have to be multiplied by a factor, but not a large one. So most of these numbers happen to be in Africa. If you look at the financial challenge, the funding flows have been $2.3 billion for the last basically 10 years. The investment required to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 7 is of the order of $23 billion, of which 4.5 are the subsidies that are needed to fill the affordability gap. Of those, it is estimated that 78%, I mean 7.8 billion, could be raised using the normal standard approaches to financing that exist now. If we want to go from the very basic tier 1 to tier 2, that may mean something like 300 kilowatt hours per year of consumption of electricity, the number of the investment goes to $49 billion. And that does not include, it is only the investment that the companies, OGS companies, have to do, but does not include what is needed to fill the affordability gap of the users. And it does not include what is needed for, as Koen was talking about, productive uses for electrification of the health centers, 72% of which in sub-Saharan Africa are not electrified, or the primary schools, 67% of which are not electrified. So the objectives of this conference, I would separate primary objective from secondary one. The primary objective is to identify what are the regulatory, business, and financial models that will make possible that all these systems that need to deploy, all of them will be deployed on a sustainable way, so that we can achieve complete electrification of a country in a sustainable and scalable way. The secondary objective will be to identify improvements in the current regulatory, business, and financial models that are struggling to reach the scale that is needed to achieve universal access. Both are compatible, and one will help the other one. So what are the issues with the present business models? In the first place, it is clear that it is needed some governmental and regulatory support. There are two excellent reports by GOGLA, together with other organizations, on guidance for governments, recommendations for how the support from the regulation and the governmental institutions, governments, ministries, should go to the OGS sector. And there is a long list that I could extract from these documents that I agree fully with. The need for strong partnership between the private sector and the governmental agencies that have to have a clear mandate with specific dispositions for productive uses of electricity that will make possible economic growth, that the OGS solution should be included in the national electrification strategies, that public funding will be needed to accelerate electrification and to reach all those that need subsidies, lower taxation to improve affordability, the emphasis on job creation, which is a tricky business without reducing affordability, the use of public funding again to de-risk the business models, the emphasis on enforcing and implementing quality standards, building trust in the population, ensuring the maintenance of the devices so that repair and recycling is done. But we would like also to look at the problem from a broader perspective. And the broader perspective means that we have some limitations in the present business models. The first one is that the challenge that we are seeing with the OGS solutions is contemplated in a silo, separate from electrification with mini grids and grid extension. But and this is not possible because although typically the business models of OGS are not regulated, on the other hand, for full electrification, we need governmental support. And that governmental support, filling the affordability gap, cannot be separated from OGS, mini grids, and grid extension, because everything comes from the same purse, which is the governmental one. And unfortunately, what we see is that the national electrification strategies of the different countries increasingly include OGS systems in their strategy, in their plans. There is also a lack of legal security for the OGS business models in different directions. One is that there is no guarantee that the affordability gap will be covered. There are isolated, sporadic programs that provide funding to have standalone solar systems, but they disappear, and it is not clear what will happen later when the devices have to be replaced. Also, we have that the poorest people pay the highest per unit electricity price, or they will have to stay without electricity. There are lack of specific regulations in a number of topics, such as what happens when the grid or mini grid arrives, quality standards, enforcement and implementation, exceptions of taxes and duties, target subsidies, etc. And I would say, and it is very important, the lack of a long-term view of what happens with the OGS business model once we reach some kind of stable situation in which some fraction of the population will have to be permanently served with OGS solutions. So perhaps it is possible to extend to OGS the best regulatory practices that have been worked elsewhere in the world in distribution. And only when and where it is necessary for universal access. So we should try to minimize the interference with the business as it is now, with the progress that Koen was presenting that is being made. So what has worked in distribution elsewhere? Well, distribution is supply of electricity as a service with a long-term view, supplied by utilities that have the mission of providing that service in an indefinite way in time. So maybe it is possible to expand the concept of distribution as infrastructure to consider not only grid extension and mini grids, but also OGS systems. The classical way in which distribution is remunerated is the efficient cost of service. And in this case, it will be needed to gather the income from revenues from affordable, regulated end-user tariffs and a regulated subsidy. And in order to get this long-term view, the solution of concession contracts, similar to the licenses of distribution companies with a long term, maybe 25 years, would be an adequate approach. That obviously has some implications. One is that from the viewpoint of the government, it is necessary a long-term integral financial approach, a perspective that will include the affordability gaps that exist in the three electrification modes. Grid extension in the rural areas is more expensive than the average tariffs. So it will need also a subsidy. The same thing happens with mini grids that have a per unit cost that, even if it is the least cost solution, is more expensive, again, than grid extension. And the same thing happens with OGS systems. So filling the affordability gap together, I think this is the only way that the government could approach an integral plan of electrification. And issues will have to be addressed carefully for the coexistence of this regulated approach that I am outlining here and the free market approaches that are typical of the OGS systems and companies in the overlapping areas. And it will be important to see how the subsidies should be targeted only for what is needed. So we will have time to discuss about these alternatives and different business models during these 3 days. This is the program that we are going to cover. After these introductions, we will have panels. The first day will be devoted to state of play and lessons that could be learned from the existing experiences. First, we will be looking at business models and payment methods. And second, we will be looking at, what is the level of demand that should be met and how to deal with subsidies that will help to make the growth of this type of business to be possible. In the second day, as I said before, we are going to look at how to address the challenges, how to target the ambitious goal of achieving Sustainable Development Goal 7, maybe in 2030, maybe later if needed, but in a proper, sustainable way. And for that, we will be looking at regulation as enabler of sustainability and scalability, what happens with the interaction between the sector, the OGS sector, and other sectors. Agriculture has been mentioned before. And then, well, going from theory concept to practice, how to make it work. And on the last day, we'll be looking ahead. We will try to look at the future together. We will be looking at emerging topics, whether this integrated approach to electrification that I have outlined is possible, how we can approach to it so that we can obtain universal access, and what could be the next things to do as a group, as professionals interested in the topic. I will finalize with some announcements on logistics. Please, moderators and panelists, connect 10 minutes before your panel so that you will have a personalized link only for you to test your connection. As I said before, what we will have in the panels will be just discussion led and with the intervention of the moderator, that will be one more panelist. And you have a guide that has been provided to guide and to suggest topics for the discussion. You don't need lengthy introductions of the bios because that will be made available in the website of the conference. Sorry, you are too many people. We have 280 people registered for the conference, so you will not be allowed to intervene talking, but you could write your comments and questions in the chat, in the Q&A, and that will be responded, if possible, during the panel, corresponding panel, or the teams from GOGLA and the ASR will take care of answering either online or later. And all the material, this presentation, by the way, my presentation will have more slides in more detail, and also the one by Koen Peters and some reading material, as you have seen. All the material related to the conference will be available free at the ASR website once we go through the different sessions. So with that, I will finish. And I'm sorry, but I think that we are not going to have a break. So we are going to start immediately with the next panel. Thank you very much.
Hello, Prof. There is a question to Mr. Peters. Maybe if he wants to address that before you go to the next panel.
Koen?
Yes, thanks. There have been quite a number of questions that I've tried to answer as you were speaking. I think the question now is solar lanterns representing the majority of sales. Does that mean that the population is stagnant of income generation and poverty reduction? I was typing up a long answer, but maybe I can provide it better here in speaking. The solar lanterns.
Okay, try to be very brief because it is scheduled that the next panel will start now.
I'll give the long answer then, still in typing.
Okay.
The solar lanterns is the biggest market because this is what is most affordable to people. It's not what they demand. What they demand eventually is more light, and phone charging is life-changing when it's the first service that you get. It's not enough to really generate opportunities for more income generation. For that, we need a bit more. But not everybody is needing that more. About a third of households are using solar home systems for livelihood improvements. So yes, we need bigger systems, but this is as a start, it's life-changing.
Thank you very much, and we will try to answer in writing in the chat. So I think that the moderator and panelists for the first panel should be ready. So Dana, Prosper, Harold, and Franklin.
Well, good evening. I'm Harold. I'm available. If I'm correct, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
That's great.
Well, we need our moderator, Dana Rysankova, Prosper, and Franklin.
Yes, hello, I'm Prosper and I'm available. Waiting. Thank you.
Hello, we can hear you well.
Thank you.
Well, it seems that we have problems with the connection of Franklin and Dana. Oh, no, Franklin is there. So it's only Dana that is missing?
Yes, Dana is not able to join. But maybe we can go ahead.
Do we have any communication from her?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so I think that we have to start. The objective of this panel is to discuss the growth of the sector from a global African perspective, in particular African perspective, the different experiences with your business models. You have different ones: purchase with cash, rent to own, energy as a service, consumer microfinancing. So I think that while we wait for Dana to start or to join, we can listen to you in the order that we have in the conference. Let me look at that because I was not supposed to be organizing this. Oh, okay. And I think that the order is Prosper in the first place. Prosper Magali is the Director of Innovation and Business Development in Ensol. So please, could you in 5 minutes or 7 minutes or so to explain what is the business model that you have adopted in your company, and that will be followed by Harold and then Franklin. Prosper, you have the word.
Thank you, Ignacio. And thanks a lot for having me in this important panel. I think first I need to maybe give a context of the country where I operate in Tanzania. So in early, I can say 2000s, when the off-grid market was emerging, and when we started operations, most of the solutions were provided by cash sales. I can say that. And that is how even our company started to operate. And slowly, when the PayGo technology emerged in the mid of 2000s, I think PayGo now, I can say, revolutionized the how we operated in general. So most of the solar system companies which came to operate in Tanzania and in East Africa, I can say, used a PayGo business model. And I can say this eventually helped a great deal to scale off-grid solar solutions, in particular to target the poorest of the poor in every corner of Tanzania and also East Africa. So I can say the PEGO is the technology which is currently leading in the provision of off-grid solutions. What I'm currently now seeing emerging, in particular for the commercial and industrial solar space, is the rent to own as well as the electricity for service model. So these are also, rent to own is quite popular now, in particular for the commercial and industrial solar space. And discussions around electricity as a service are now emerging around the same commercial and industrial solar space. Yeah, so what I see is maybe in future to be able to scale, and I think Ignacio, even from your presentation where you said maybe the poorest are paying higher per unit electricity price. And this is because for the PEGO, there are a lot of expenses included in the payments to cover all the operational costs. So eventually the poorest are quite paying higher. So I believe maybe electricity as a service model is going to take shape in the future, and that will also help the poorest maybe to pay less compared to what they are currently paying. So to begin with, that would be my comment. Thank you, Ignacio.
Thank you very much. We will come back to you, but now let's listen to Harold de Riek. He's the founder of All Solar World.
Thank you very much. I'm Harold de Riek. Thank you very much for having us here in this great event today. I think it's very important to discuss the PEGO option. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of All Solar. The company was incorporated in 2014 with our headquarters in Hong Kong. Currently, we're setting up operations in Tanzania, and we have operations in Indonesia, Southeast Asia. We did our first, we were approved by the Lighting Global program in March 2016, when we really start to experience how the system and how the sales works in the off-grid solar sector. We did a major deal of 50,000 units to Ethiopia, which was funded by the World Bank back in the days, and we get paid by the Development Bank Ethiopia. But that was purely because our business was focused on manufacturing. In the experience what we get by visiting and set up business in Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia, we learned that the PEGO sector is a massive opportunity. What we did over the year, we created the idea when I was on a trip to Indonesia, where I found a Wi-Fi dongle, what is currently our partner uCloudlink. What we did is we built in the Wi-Fi module in our power bank, where we can connect the people to the internet. So we're not providing currently only a solar home system. And besides our solar home system with an integrated Wi-Fi module, via our digital transaction platform, we can connect the end consumer to the financial institutions. Currently, we are in the process to set up All Solar World Tanzania with local partners. And sadly, I cannot announce the name of the banks, but we are under signing 2 MOUs with 2 banks who are willing to finance the product to the end consumer. How it will work, we look into different business model where under woman empowerment. So we make the woman or the sales agents who gonna sell the product to the end consumer. They go there with an app on their phone. which connect them to the financial institution. They will fill in the contact details and all the requirement information what needed from the end consumer. Within 3 to 5 days, this will be approved or disapproved by the bank, and the banks will provide the loans to the end consumers. So that is where we currently working on. As what is mentioned in the earlier presentation, I think it's key that we can get access to working capital. It is very great that there are result-based finance, but for us as an early stage company with a product ready to use and go to market, that will be great if they get attention to more funding for companies in the position where we are. I think that's my my presentation to start with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harold. And let's see what Franklin Arinda, who is the Compliance and External Relations Manager at FRES, could tell us about the innovative approach that they have been following in several African countries. Franklin?
Franklin here from FRES Uganda. FRES is Foundation of Rural Energy Services, who is in Netherlands as a foundation, but and several.
Keep the same distance to the microphone and close so that it is not changing the volume.
Okay. So we have 4 FRES companies in Africa, Uganda being one of them, the rest being in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea-Bissau. And in the off-grid market, we entered with energy as a service model, which you mentioned as electricity as a service. And our approach really was to, to tackle the challenges that were being faced, especially from the product and distribution models that were popular at the time. And one of them was affordability, and was service, and also reliability of the equipment. So energy as a service commits us to give the customers the best service there is, otherwise they do not pay. We charge energy access fee, not based on how much energy one uses, but rather, access to the system, which is determined by, needs analysis done when customer is onboarding. We've been in operation since 2012 in Uganda, and we've faced a lot of challenges. One being, collecting the fees from the customers themselves. It was easy enough getting the customers because customers pay very small connection fee to join our program, but then every month, and at the beginning it was very expensive for us to move to every customer, picking money at the end of every month. And we tried to learn from the pay-go technology and see how could we incorporate this in our business model. And that's what we did beginning 2020. And we now give automatic switches to our customers, enable access when someone has paid, and deny access once someone has not paid. So basically the switch, once someone pays, is given a number of days according to what they have paid. Minimum is 30 days, and then it keeps counting down. At the end of the 30 days, the system will go off and demand payment again. And once someone pays it again, comes back on, which was, a game changer for us. We saw our payment rates increase from 60% to 95%. And we believe this is, what is going to keep us in the market. The biggest challenge for model really is on the scale, because of the nature of operations. We we have a lot of operational challenges.
I don't know, people are complaining that they cannot hear you well. So try to keep some distance. I mean, if it is too close, there is some noise. So try to speak clearly to the microphone and keep the same distance always. Otherwise, people are not understanding what you say.
Okay, how is this?
Okay.
Much okay. Sorry about that. Maybe a recap of what I was saying in brief. I was saying that our energy as a service model really encountered challenges at the beginning because of, difficulty in collecting the service fees. But we have turned that around by, incorporating pay as you go in our model, where customers pay to access the energy, and then we have the system disconnect them. And challenges were, faced in the industry by players like us really is on scale. Our model needs, a minimum of up to 10,000 customers in order to be sustainable. So for new players, you have to have that kind of financing or funding to be able to come and operate in a sustainable way. We were lucky at the beginning to have been funded by the EU in a big way to start operations. But again, we also face challenges of, the perception of the market. People like to own, and they keep challenging us that why can't we own your systems? Why can't we pay? Even some customers that have money want to, copy the same systems and buy them. But the strength of the model is not really in the quality of the systems themselves, but in the technical aspect, in the maintenance programs that we deploy. So people could buy the systems we give them, but they don't have the expertise to keep them operational. And small mistakes like not cleaning panels can make the entire system useless. And we also had challenges with the government understanding our model and thinking that we charge a lot of money compared to the national grid. Yeah, but we found out that for small home systems, definitely there's no way of charging rates comparable to the grid. But as technology is improving, we're seeing indicators that even smaller home systems are going to be in the future cheaper than the grid. We see that already in the Tier 4 systems that we're designing. We're now able to give so those systems at slightly cheaper than the grid. Still having changes in smaller systems, the extent we actually moved away from Tier 1 systems completely from our model because we could not afford to give the service at the rate it was. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, something that happens is that people that are connected to the grid are used to pay a fee, right? And this is similar to what you do with your energy as a service. Why people have difficulty in understanding your model? We cannot hear.
Franklin, we can still hear you.
Okay, you can try to fix.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now again.
Yeah, I was saying that the difficulty comes in people wanting to compare the rates they're paying on the grid with what they would pay if they get our systems. And for small systems, Tier 2, for example, our rates are about 3 times as expensive as the grid. So they look at that as, being ripped off. And they always ask the same question, are we paying until when? So they want to pay and own after a certain point of time. So it's what is, market is acceptable. But for us, people pay as long as they have our system, more like the grid does.
Okay, but if you are providing solar home systems, then you are typically in places where people don't have access to the grid, right?
Yes.
So they cannot really compare because the grid is not available to them, right?
Yeah, mostly the grid is in the trading centers. Almost every trading center now has a grid. So the people we give are far from the trading centers, but they come to the trading centers and can easily compare.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have areas where the grid is not reliable. So someone has grid, but he wants to add, solar system.
Okay.
And then wants to pay the same amount of money.
Okay, so let's go back now to Prosper. I think that there is a question on how regulation could help your businesses. So is there anything that regulators could do so that the life of your companies could be better, could be easier, you could be more viable? Prosper, what can you say about this?
Thank you, Ignacio. Maybe let me first comment on Franklin's comment on the mindset to ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is something we need as an industry. We really need to work on that because that is actually the mindset in the market. People want to own solutions. And when you come in with energy for a service model, it brings a lot of challenges actually, in particular if you are planning to scale. So this is something we really need to work on, and in particular in raising awareness of this emerging business model in the off-grid solar market, so that people get aware that this is something also new and can be applied, and actually it can help in making the price per unit to be a bit lower and affordable to the people. So awareness is very important for this model, for if we really need to scale in that particular way. So on regulations, I think regulations is a number one factor if we really want to excel in provision of off-grid solutions. Without proper regulations, but having regulations is one thing. Uncertainty and implementation of the regulations is also very, very important. We have a very good example how regulations could negatively impact the market, which happened in Tanzania in the mini-grid space. We had some challenges in the mini-grid market in Tanzania, where the government wanted mini-grid tariffs to be equal to the grid tariffs. So this was quite a challenge, and now scaling mini-grids in Tanzania is quite difficult. So it is very important to ensure that we have supportive regulatory framework, and we have certainty actually in countries, but also the good regulations that we have are now enforced to make sure that investors and suppliers can believe and have confidence in the market where they are operating in. So regulations are quite key.
Okay, and Harold, the same topic.
Yeah, I think-
regarding also the ownership versus the fee and how regulation could be helpful?
No, I think that's absolutely what both said. The regulations is very important. They are correct, especially for the quality regulations on the product. Once we start developing our new product, we will provide a 3-year warranty. Why a 3-year warranty? If we make the calculation about the cost of kerosene and the cost of a solar home system, the people financed by the financial institutions, they can pay off the product within 2.5 years. What is in the warranty regulations of 3 years. But besides that, by providing people also with an internet connection and make them bankable, make the on-bank bankable, we can provide a lot of more services because people can create online businesses, people can get access to healthcare, children can get access to education programs. So there is a lot more than only the solar home system and the financial model around that. I think if you allowed me to tell about regulations in that, what we're currently doing and exploring in Indonesia is working with education programs, and we start working and cooperating with Salvation Army, and that is with the focus on education. Besides that comes a complete new business model, and a lot of money is spent on CSR programs in Indonesia. 2% of their revenue they need to spend on CSR. And that is where we come in, and here we come. Indonesia is certainly not in the Verasol program yet, as what we see coming back to the regulation about quality issues. We see here a lot of poor quality products on the market, where everybody in the market or in our sector can agree on is if you have no regulations and people or companies keep supplying poor quality products, the people in the rural areas losing the trust in proper solar products. Again, here we come to the point about regulations provide a 2 or 3 year warranty. We're going to do a 3-year warranty where people can pay the product in 2.5 years, what is in the warranty time. But from the experience of our product, there are some people are still using it after 5-6 years. And that is what we want to see by the good regulations of the program.
Okay, that brings us to the issue of what happens when the solar kits, the solar home systems start non-functioning and have to be replaced. I mean, this is an issue that is treated differently with the approach that Fresh was describing, in which they are responsible for the replacement and the functioning of the devices, and the other approaches. Could you tell us something also, Prosper, and then Franklin again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important that you provide a proper after sales with an internet connection that will be integrated in our digital transaction platform as well. So people can mention that there is a problem with the product. Even if it's not we work with sales agents. Those sales agents that can be the Dukas in Tanzania, for example, where people always have a point where they can go back to. Sure, it depends how they treat the product. That's very important. But I think it's also very important to mention that our product will have a GPS tracker. And here we come to the big point, if products will disappear. Our experience and what we hear from colleagues in the field is that people, a solar panel will disappear, but we can measure everything in our platform, so we can exactly see what's going on. Most of the time, the experience what we have with our product, the troubleshoot is very easy. Or if they, drop the battery underground, it's very hard to replace it. But if you have a proper after sales, we sell a plug-and-play system, what is easy to handle. And that is also educate your sales agents that they know what to do when there is troubleshooting. Will it be a manufacturer's default? So from our side, sure, you need to replace the product. But I think that is the regulations about the high quality products and what can make the difference in the sector. I think what Prosper also mentioned, it's very important, the affordability of the product. But as we all know, and what Koen also mentioned in the introduction, the cost price of a lot of like LEDs are way cheaper. Solar panels are way cheaper than 10 years ago. From our opinion, you can provide a proper quality product, but like what I said, if we're using a different finance model where the product will be financed by the bank, that's where banks are for. They need to give loans, not we as a company. That's why we can understand the high interest rates, what currently by pay-go companies, what I understand and what mentioned was in the Bloomberg article from last year, 40 to 50% interest. What is understandable, what was mentioned in one of the GOGLA events as well, 30% of the people don't pay, is also understandable. When people have a bad crop, but they want to keep the light on, okay, let's say they need to pay $10 a month or $2.5 per week. We will looking into weekly payments to low down the risk for the end consumer. But
well, I have lost connection and I don't know if it is me or it is you.
I think it's everybody who is lost him.
Oh, okay. Then, well, while we recover Harold, we can go back to Prosper and look at the same question. So have you had the experience already of people that have finished the physical life of the solar systems and they have to replace them? Do you have a follow-up so that you keep the same customers? Prosper?
Yes, Ignacio, thank you so much. In general, I can say electronic waste in general in most of African countries is quite a concern. And I think this is a role which maybe the School of Regulations can play. In particular, maybe having proper regulation governing management of electronic waste in different markets. I understand maybe different countries have their own regulations or management of electronic waste, but most of the time it is not that clear to suppliers, to customers. And here we are speaking of customers at last miles, very, very remote. A customer who has bought a solar antenna in a remote rural area, do they understand what they need to do when the device has reached the end of life? So I think, first of all, maybe looking at what each country is doing related to regulations governing electronic waste. This is very important. And maybe the School of Regulations can also play a role, maybe working with regulators around the countries and also management councils around the countries to have very clear system of managing electronic waste. And I think in the next few years to come, this will be a huge, huge concern. And we will have a lot of electronic waste scattered, in particular in different remote rural areas. So for us, for the customers that we serve, we collect all the end of life devices for recycling. But I believe not all of the customers, in particular those that are quite remote, can do that. So there's a need now to look at this and see, as a sector, what we can do.
Okay, now let's go back to Franklin. Let's hope that we can hear you well. What is your experience about the replacement of the devices when they finish their physical useful life? And is that a problem for the company? Is something that happens smoothly? Could you tell us?
Ignacio,
Yes.
am I better now?
Wow, that's much better.
I'll remove the mic. I'm speaking from the laptop microphone.
Right, that works much better. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So we definitely have faced, challenges because in our service contract we have to replace components, and I would say we replace everything from even the bulbs themselves. So first of all, we had to make sure we had the best equipment, best components, so that we don't have a lot of replacements. So we spent a lot of money on long cycle batteries that we had, budgeted for 5 years, but I've seen some have gone up to 8 years on average. Also key is on the sizing of the systems themselves. We have to know whether customer is going to use the system mostly during the day or at night. So for businesses, for example, they use the systems more during the day. So we give them systems with more PV capacity. Now for homesteads, they are going to use the system mostly at night when they are back from work. So they need more battery capacity. And then also we make sure that customers do not add loads. That's also another big thing. If customer wants a system for charging and lights, then tomorrow he buys a TV and connects, he buys a home theater, he connects. And then, so we had to find a way of restricting access to the system. So we get our batteries and hide them in the battery box that is lockable. So the battery plus the charge controller are not accessible by the customer. So that way, we were able to regulate how the system is used. But even then, the systems will eventually, come the end of their lifespan. We decided to have a contract with, a recycler in Rwanda, Invaluable, that helps us to recycle the batteries because we collect all the dead batteries and store them in our containers at office, including dead bulbs, or cables, everything. So we collect it and store it. Then at the end of the year, we count how many tons we have, and then we're able to recycle them through Invaluable, and we know we get a fee if some of the equipment, especially batteries, have a positive recycle value. Then for the cables and battery lamps, we pay for those. So they net off, and then they give us, a fee. Or if we are selling more of the, or giving them more of the items that have no recycle value, then we pay for that. And so far, it has worked for us well. And now we believe that our model gives us unique access to that, because if you don't have that, or you are selling your equipment, then you're not going to go to the customer and want to pick the dead battery. They're going to dismantle it. They're going to try to get every kind of, mileage out of it, and then it will end up in the, the garbage pits and everywhere where it is a danger to the environment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You were talking about demand growth. Is that something that you in your company you try to promote so that people can go from your basic product to use the electricity for some other uses and purchase some appliances? Do you help them with that?
Yes, our model allows us to scale up the customers to do scale up. We call it upgrade. So a customer could start with a small system for lighting, and then later.
What do you call a small system?
A small system
how many
is
watts peak?
it has an 80-watt peak panel and a 100-amp-hour battery. That's the smallest we give. Yes. So on that system, we don't allow customers to put a TV, for example. It's used for lighting and phone charging. So they can put up to, give them 3 lighting points, but they can add an extra 2, and that's it. So in case now, most people want TV. So usually everyone eventually will buy a TV. That's why as of 2021, we disconnected selling that system. Only people who got it earlier are the ones who have it, because we noticed that everyone can add a TV. So systems for TV have the same battery, but with more panels. So they are able to charge faster during the day. And so that's what we are promoting. And it helps the system to remain not overused, which is not the case when someone buys their own system, because then the challenge with the solar system is that you can keep adding things and it will work, but it will fail faster. What would have failed in 5 years now will fail in 2 years, and then the customer will blame the quality of the equipment, yet it is just overuse.
Okay, but you could have a larger battery also, right? And that would solve the problem.
Yes, in our model, larger battery means that the customer is going to pay a bit more, because it means a bigger replacement cost for ourselves.
Right. That will increase the cost significantly.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back to Prosper, and if possible to Harold. Prosper, again, anything that you do regarding demand growth and trying to promote that people use efficient appliances and to increase the demand of what you supply? Prosper?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Ignacio. So maybe luckily for us, we focus on medium scale solutions. We actually currently do not focus as solar for small applications. So we so much focus on solar for productive use. So that is where we are. And as Franklin said, our customers can start with a smaller system and upgrade or scale to larger systems. So most of our systems are in the range between 200 watts. So that is a system which we normally supply. And there's a room for them to upgrade to whatever size that they can afford. So, and currently, as I said, our focus is on solar for productive use. So we so much deal with different type of businesses, both in on and off-grid areas. We also sell some smallholder farmers for irrigation solutions. We also focus on solar for different productive use activities, but there is room for our customers to upgrade, so they can start with a smaller system and upgrade to a level which they can afford.
Okay, thank you very much. And well, Harold, I don't know if we keep the connection with you. You were talking, oh yes, I see you. Of course, you have the internet and Wi-Fi service in parallel, but did you try to offer other services beyond that? beyond
Yeah,
internet?
absolutely. Like what I before explained that we can focus on healthcare, education,
Right.
online businesses. So in the near future, absolutely. Once we prove that this system will work, especially financed by the bank, we can provide larger systems as well. And like what Prosper also mentioned, till what can people affordable? That's a little bit, I think that's quite interesting question as well. What we see, especially in Indonesia, Indonesia is a special country with 17,000 islands. On 12,000 islands, people are living on. Most of those islands have no electricity. So to give you an idea, pretty much the same market as Tanzania, 10 million households without electricity. Local houses here, they're using 900-watt systems for a fridge, a TV. So in the near future, absolutely, because we get the demand from Indonesia as well to provide those systems. Well, as we all know, for us, it's not really a problem. If you can manufacture a small system, we can manufacture a bigger system as well with the same system. And how we call it is connectivity for productive use. Because once people are connected to the internet, well, the world open. And I think that is pretty important. Well, yeah, as we all know, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Okay.
see
Well,
ourselves within.
thank you very much. I think that now we are hitting the end of this panel. I think that we have survived quite well the fact of not having a moderator. Thank you for your cooperation. And now we break for 10 minutes and we will go with our second panel at 5 sharp. Okay, thank you very much. Carol, Prosper, and Franklin.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Let's meet again in 10 minutes. Goodbye.
Bye.
Well, if we are recording now.
Yes,
Okay.
we are ready.
Okay, so I think that we are ready for our panel number 2, which is on minimum required demand and subsidies as catalysts for the growth of the sector. Our moderator will be Rosalie Marsden, Senior Associate in Acumen. Rosalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. It's great to be here with you all today. Thank you very much for having me as a moderator. So for this session, I thought I'd do a quick introduction of myself and then introduce the panelists before we dive in. So my name is Rosalie Marsden. I'm a senior associate at Acumen in our Hardest to Reach team, which is a new facility focused on investing in off-grid solar in 16 hardest to reach sub-Saharan African countries. And so the discussions we're having today are very relevant to the work that we're doing. So very happy to be involved. Today on the panel, I've got a great number of panelists joining us today. So firstly, Josh Sebastian, who's a senior expert in RBF and fund management at S&V Global Energy. Got Uche Hona, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, energy principal specialist at the SE for All, and then Julio Eisman, who's the president of the Spanish Universal Energy Access Table. So I thought perhaps we could do a quick round of introductions. So firstly, I'd like to hand over to Josh Sebastian.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to meet you all today. As you mentioned, I work with S&V's global energy team supporting RBF throughout our portfolio, largely through sub-Saharan and Eastern Africa, and increasingly through Asia, mostly on the household energy side, expanding more recently into mini grids and blended financing instruments in productive use applications.
Thank you, Josh. So now I pass over to Uche. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Uche Hona. So I'm a principal energy specialist at SC for All and the program manager for the Universal Energy Facility supported by the SC for All. The facility is a results-based financing facility aimed at catalyzing energy access, mostly right now in sub-Saharan Africa, in Nigeria. We have programs currently in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, DRC, Benin Republic, and Madagascar. But definitely expanding into other countries and also possibly Southeast Asia and Caribbean nations in the near future. So yeah, basically with our RBF, we provide subsidies to catalyze energy access. So thanks everyone.
Thanks, Uche. And then lastly, Julio, kindly introduce yourself as well. Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosalie. Thirdly, I would say that the Spanish Universal Energy Access Table is an association of organizations from academy, from the business, and from NGO working together to get the universal energy access and also to eliminate the energy poverty. I had the opportunity 50 years ago to design and to implement in Peru a model with the help of a foundation, of a corporate foundation of Acciona, to implement, I said, a model that we call Luz en Casa, light at home, to provide electricity with solar home system to households in remote, isolated, and dispersed community where the grid could not be used. This model is now applied to 5 countries with different peculiarities, as Mexico, Panama, the Philippines, Chile, and the refugee camps and host communities in northern Ethiopia. And nowadays, it's providing basic electricity to around 100,000 people. In other words, some users are paying the tariff for 15 years, and I think that this is a good sustainability test. And the principle of the core principle of this light-at-home delivery model is consider the energy as a service. This implies to have a micro or to fund a micro utility to provide the service according with their own innovative business model, because in this case it's not backed by more than 100 years experience of the grid utilities, but also it needs regulation to avoid the abuse and also to provide the adequate balance and define the conditions for the sustainability and affordability of the model. For me, the most important thing are that the clients, the users, must pay a tariff. This is important because it empowers the user to require the contracted service. For most users, this is a new experience which requires a cultural change. And with the gift, you have only the option to thanks. But the tariff must be affordable for the potential user. We use the criterion, the affordability criterion, that the tariff must be lower than the previous average cost in alternative energetics like candles, kerosene, batteries, charging the mobiles, etc. To get better service with less cost is a powerful idea that all people understand, and this is part of the understanding with the people. Of course, economic viability is critical point. It's not only the tariff cover all the costs, but it requires a subsidy. I think that we could speak later about the subsidies. And the other key point is training for the users to understand why and how to manage the solar system, to accept the solution, and to know their rights and duties. Also, training for local technicians for installing and repairing the systems, training as a way to know, definitely to know and to commit each other, supplier and clients. And this is the main topic of this model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julio. Thank you very much. So this panel is focusing really on the dilemma that appears in a national electrification strategy when deciding the minimum demand that should be supplied in a given context of customer affordability, availability of subsidies, and potential for economic growth. So kind of what I think would be helpful today is, we have a few different things that we can discuss with the panel, and then also there's a Q&A box. So if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to ask those, and then we can ask the panelists. And I think that whilst I'll be putting some of these questions to each of the panelists in turn, if anyone feels like they wants to jump in, have any responses within the panel, please do feel free to do that. I think having a lively debate on this is a really good way forward. So I think to start with, a question to Uche. So do you, in your opinion, and I know that SE4All has had a lot of engagement with governments, and I know that you particularly have worked in results-based financing and subsidies, but given the interaction with governments, do you think that a minimum level of demand to be supplied and the associated reliability level should be specified in national electrification strategies? And if so, what should the criteria be used in order to specify these minimum performance levels?
All right, thanks. Yeah, I think definitely establishing a minimum level of demand and as well as a corresponding reliability level, they're critical and crucial for ensuring consistent and equitable access to power, and that's across various regions. They facilitate proper planning and optimal allocation of resources. As far as criteria to specify these levels, it should encompass regional demand analysis. So the data is really critical. We want to look at local economic activity, obviously population density, and then really also the potential for integrating renewable energy. Because I mean, we all want clean solutions to electrifying most times rural communities. But in particular, I think it's essential to apply these levels in regions where there is significant economic disparity and substantial energy accessibility issues. And this promotes energy justice and social equity. And ultimately, what we want to do is foster local economic development through these reliable energy solutions. So thank you.
Thank you, Uche. And John Sebastian, I know that SNV, you've worked on a lot of projects as well. Do you have anything, any kind of additional remarks on this comment?
Well, I think it's considering, what the devices you're promoting are, like if you're working on mini grids or larger scale installations versus more decentralized applications. So in mini grids where your localities are fixed and much more can be known, you have much more ability to predict demand more accurately. When it comes to decentralized or retail, more solution, such as like smaller solar home systems, or in the 200 to 500 watt range, I think that then you have to also consider that you need a competitive marketplace. You need kind of parameters that are there so that there's stimulus for companies to go to more challenging markets, but also that there's a sandbox, because then if it's too prescriptive, you're supporting a market that can't sustain itself. So I think it has to be like a nuanced or diversified approach, by context specific to technology provider and state of the market. I think there's a lot of discussion that goes on about performance-based financing as a de-risking instrument, and then lots of talk always de-risking. It's very valid and important. I think where we need to consider that, though, is to the extent that we're de-risking is about risk reduction, not risk removal. So there is a healthy amount of risk that should be maintained, just to keep people on their toes. Otherwise, the private sector component starts losing the inherent value of entrepreneurism, which is great entrepreneurs are people who are willing to see opportunity and take risk to seize it. And that's kind of the spirit we need to capture if we really want transformative growth in the sector moving forward.
Thank you. And I think that leads that relates to another topic I have in mind. But firstly, Julio, I'd like to hear whether you have any thoughts, and also, yeah, on not only in what situations these levels should be applied. So these minimum performance levels, in which situations these should be applied if we are using these criteria to specify minimum performance levels.
Yeah, you refer to minimum level of demand and reliability level. For me, there's different concepts and different treatment would be. I think that it would be much more convenient to specify the minimum service level in national electrification strategies. Refer to the 5 tiers of the classical 5 tiers. But in any case, it is necessary to be specified in the national electrification plan, because it is an important cost component of the plan. Referring to reliability, considering the reliability level as a whole, it depends not only on the equipment, solar consistent reliability, but also on the provider organization to attempt the technical incident. In this case, reliability is part of the quality services, quality supply, and must be considered at the regulation level. The desirable minimum electrification level for me would be tier 3. This can supply refrigerator, which is the most consuming appliance, most demanded in certain, especially in certain areas, in certain zones. And this is the main purpose is to conserve the food. But I have to add two comments. Thirdly, technology evolution allows us to increase energy efficiency. And this means that the service level can be increased with the same energy consumption. The important is the service level, not the equipment power. We are seeing this evolution with LED, but also in our appliances, include the refrigerators. And secondly, as limited by cost and to extend the benefits of the electricity as many persons as possible, the electrification plan can specify a tier 2 as minimum electrification level, but with 2 conditions. The first, that the solar consistent can be expanded easily to a tier 3 level. And the second condition is that the electricity provider must offer this expansion service. And what the conclusion is that the specification of both concepts can be and must be evolved in time, according with the technology, but also according with the different conditions. So it would be an evolution.
Thank you. So kind of ability to have a modular approach or flexibility over time as demand and affordability potentially grows. Because that was something that I thought was interesting of you kind of specifying a minimum tier. Whereas Uche, I feel like what you were saying was kind of making it more slightly aligned with justice, you know, energy justice, and as a tool for equality, which maybe wouldn't, whilst obviously having a minimum tier could be a good direction to go towards, but the affordability question then plays into that, doesn't it, where people might potentially not be able to afford tier 3 products. I wondered whether you could comment on that.
Yeah, so I was even just dropping a comment in the chat. So in the UEF, we do provide a minimum, I guess, allocation for power per user, right? So it's also to ensure that reliability, and we also make sure that there's a CITI and SIFI standards inside of our minimum technical standard document. But if you're talking about, I guess, customers not being able to afford, that's definitely a consideration. And when you go up higher in the tier, that affordability does become an issue. But I think one thing that you can do to mitigate that is set cost-reflective tariffs, right? Cost-reflective tariffs make sure that I'm speaking more on the side of mini-grids than on maybe solar home systems. Cost-reflective tariffs ensure that, one, the energy access company that is deploying these systems is able to generate enough revenue to actually get a return on their investment, but at the same time ensuring that there is affordable tariff and expenditure from all of these customers. So I think for minimum demand, it's a balancing act, right? You want to make sure that obviously the energy is affordable, but at the same time the businesses are able to run long term and are sustainable. And for mini grids, the truth is that the higher you go in tier, it's actually better for the developer or the company, because that means that more energy is being consumed and more revenue is being generated. So just wanted to add that bit in.
Thank you for that. I'd like to lead on, I think, from something that Josh was saying about the kind of the balance between a competitive marketplace and kind of not wanting to, keep people on their toes and kind of have that kind of private sector involvement, but of course potentially needing like the de-risking element that the public sector could bring. So I'd like to ask Josh whether you think that the supply of electricity for off-grid solar systems, do you think that should be left to the market or to market entirely or donor initiatives entirely, or whether you think there's a role for both of them here?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on the scale and the size of the technology that's being promoted. So I think in the off-grid solar home system space, it can be much more market driven. I think that's been proven in a number of countries. When it starts entering into the mini grids, then I think that's where the relationship needs to be, a bit more blended, and especially when it gets to utility type of levels, obviously, I think with the state backing. So I think that the mix that you want in there, though, and this kind of relates to the previous question, is more of a diversified approach in the national electrification plans or national planning that's showing how those segments in the off-grid space can interplay where they're more viable. Because I think it's, how would you put it, for giving a roadmap to where the mix of these options is most realistic, and allowing credit for that diversified approach to delivery, which I think right now it's just kind of, this will be by solar and then this will be by the main, where I think there's a lot more space and nuance to achieve universal access goal. And that's where, I think that's where the dance kind of is now. That the best example I've seen of that actually in the past couple of years is actually through some of the cooking programs and cooking strategies that come out, where they're much more diversified now, looking at the service and product levels and needs through a number of different rural, peri-urban, urban contexts, and then broken out again through the country. And it would be, I haven't seen it so much in the off-grid solar space, but I think it would add a tremendous amount of value. Because right now what I tend to see is that solar is kind of in the mix there. But for mini grids, it's like, yeah, just go here where we have no plan of going with the grid for the foreseeable future. And I think we need more detail coming in there and more cooperation in that space to build these nascent markets and bring them truly to scale.
Thank you. And are there any regulations in particular you think could help kind of, particularly with the mini grids, but within off-grid solar as well, help kind of develop this and kind of mobilize with these public-private partnerships?
Well, I think, speaking to what Uche is mentioning as well, truly costed tariffs. I know that's a fundamental issue in the space right now. That the cost comparison is always being made to what can be provided from the mains, but that's really not comparable. So it's not true cost reflective and really undermines the business case at the household level. So I think that's a critical ingredient in the mix. I think as in terms of what else needs to be there in the regulatory space. On the mini grid end, from what I would see, is just a real clear path and runway to getting deals closed and the mini grid licenses realized. There's a lot of steps along the way to go and do that. And it can be bridged to the sense in some programs we're working on where it's really mapped and modeled and sites are pre-selected. But then this creates a whole set of other risks, like, is that modeling correct? Is that demand that we've estimated actually going to be there? And that kind of prolongs the process a little bit as well and can be a bit prescriptive. But I think really that runway and buy into the path that, you know, these are the requirements that will need to be done. These are the players that are here getting more of a one-stop shop type of services that, yes, this is a priority, it will get done. From the regulatory lens, that's the main area I see.
Thank you, Josh. I see, Uche, you have a response to that.
Yeah, just wanted to first of all agree with Josh. I think he really hit it on the head. For me, it's really to have a well-structured and organized mini grid. What's the word I'm looking for? Documents, right? Regulation documents, right? And that should encompass everything from what happens when you know, on grid or the natural grid comes close to the mini grids. What happens to those assets? How are tariffs defined? How are testing procedures done? And then also to tap on another point that he made. One way that you know, programs can really I guess take this task head on is to actually find ways. I'll speak directly about a program I previously worked on, the World Bank Nigeria Electrification Program. So it was a 350 million USD facility to the government of Nigeria, focused on mini grids, SHS, and some captive power plants for universities. And one thing that we noticed in this program was that navigating the regulatory and permitting landscape in countries is difficult for developers. A lot of them are good at, you know, building solar plants and connecting customers, but they're not good at getting building permits. They're not good at dealing with inspection agencies. You know, all those things that they need to navigate. And just tapping off of what Josh said, we noticed that. And early on, what we actually did, we set up task force in each of these kind of ministries or agencies. So when developers that were trying to, you know, construct mini grids on our project had challenges, they came to us and we had a direct liaison in these ministries. We worked with the ministries to improve their policies and efficiencies. At times, we even actually built out web portals to fast track some of these application processes and give people a concise place where they could see the steps needed and follow them systematically by uploading these things digitally. And that, you know, increased the turnaround of all of these, you know, permits and inspection certificates and all of those kind of things. So just wanted to add that, yeah, there's a lot to do in that space, but with the proper structuring of a mini grid regulation and proper handholding of government, these tasks can be achieved.
Thank you for that helpful context, and it's you know, great to hear of examples where these are working and where the regulation really is helping, you know, enable these companies to support their goals in achieving universal energy access. And I wonder, yeah, what some other lessons are that can be learned from experiences. Julio, you were kind of talking about some of the experiences that you've had in your experience. So I wonder whether you could potentially share some of the lessons there that you've learned in your expertise. Thank you.
Referring to the solar home systems, I would like to comment that we have, until now, we have a market which is a technology-driven market or a manufacturer-driven market. And this requires a well-informed customer to evaluate different aspects of quality, warranty, repairing, replacement services, and so on. But this is not the case for the last electrification mile. So the consumers support an important hidden cost, very difficult to evaluate for them. slowly, I think that we are evolving, the market is evolving, and must evolve to a service-centered market, a service-driven market. The electricity supplier assumes or must assume the equipment quality, the repairing, the replacement service, and the client only must be assured that he receives the contracted services, as you and me. And for me, this could be a clear regulated service. With topics which I would say about to regulate the service level, the service quality, tariffs, of course, subsidies, how to manage the grid connected situation, which is a difficulty in the past, very important, how to manage also the payment, and these are the more important topics that, from my point of view, must be regulated.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to focus in a bit on the role of subsidies, kind of potentially both looking at supply side subsidies and demand side subsidies and other forms of subsidies, and kind of understanding what role they can play and what form they can take. So I'd really like to know from Uche whether you kind of have experience of these subsidies in your work with SE for All, and how these could potentially play a role in helping companies achieve last mile electrification.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think for off-grid, solutions, subsidies are still, quite important at this time. However, it's important that we take consideration into subsidy design. Subsidies should be targeted, so they should have direct, so especially with my experience, result-based financing does two things. It's a subsidy, but it's directly tied to a result, right? So it's targeted. We have timelines for this subsidy, and it should also be sustainable, right? You don't want to distort the market and create dependencies that over time just aren't sustainable. So with proper subsidy design, I think what you now do, also going back to a comment Josh made earlier, is that you don't have, I guess, the energy access now becomes, I guess, universal within a country. It's not just targeted at pockets of the easiest locations to electrify. The subsidies can encourage people to go to those last mile locations that ordinarily would not be viable without some sort of subsidy to these developers. So yeah, I think subsidies are important. They should be considered very critically in the design stage, should be targeted, time-bound, and sustainable. Thanks.
Thank you. I wonder, Julio, whether you have anything to add there on your experience in Latin America. I know that there are some very successful subsidy programs in some sub-Saharan African countries, particularly Togo, Rwanda, but it would be interesting to hear your experience too.
Well, I would say that the subsidy we had no a very good press in certain part of opinions, but it's a common practice in all the countries, and this is very important to notice. Of course, the sound tariff design pretends to be reflective cost as a whole, but they are not specifically adjusted to the cost to supply to each consumer or to each type of consumer. For instance, the residential consumers allocated in an island have a higher distribution cost than those allocated in large cities, but they have the same tariff for the same consumption. Or in many countries, the industrial tariffs are relatively lower than the residential tariffs, not always justified by synergies. This implies that they are intrinsic subsidies that are generally accepted in most countries. But also, there are also extrinsic subsidies called, or could be called, social tariffs or equivalent for people under specific conditions, poor, old, discapacities, so on. These stretching subsidies can be financed by a national budget of the government or by the other consumer, which is a cross subsidy, which is better from my point of view, as it doesn't depend on the political priorities of the government. In more countries, this subsidy in the electric sector only apply to grid-connected consumers. That was the case in Peru, where they extended this subsidy to consumers supplied by standalone solar home systems in 2010. This would be the case in some other countries. Also, I would like to comment about that the subsidies may be intrinsic or extrinsic. Normally exist in all countries, as I commented, but these subsidies for the grid-connected customers, complement the tariff to assure the regulated income to the service provider. But the subsidies for solar home system, electricity supply, are CapEx focused in the best case, but no income subsidy to complement the tariff. With an income-focused subsidy, can be possible to finance the investment. The reverse doesn't work. This is an important point in order to finance the electrification. The tax is to extend the grid-connected user subsidies to solar home systems connected in an appropriate way.
Thank you. And is that mostly, do you think, driven by governments or by development partners or kind of a combination of both?
Do you refer to the provision of the subsidies?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, I prefer, as I commented, this was the case in its operation in Peru, a cross subsidy.
Yeah.
It's a charge from the users that consume larger than a certain quantity in order to provide part of the total cost for the users that consume less than a certain quantity of energy. This is a very simple criterion that could be sophisticated in order to focus more clearly to the poorest people.
Thank you. And Josh, I'd love to hear as well your experience with probably results-based finance focused subsidies, very targeted subsidies like Yucha was saying. Is this kind of the main, do you think that that's kind of the main tool that could be used, or do you think there are other ones as well, kind of when it comes to subsidies?
Yeah, I think, well, there are a couple of things to consider. It should really be looking at the market as a whole and what you're trying to achieve, particularly in nascent markets or areas or countries where there's not so much base activity to go to, where there may be a need then to attract new players to start in new countries or new places, right? Now, that means there's going to be a lot of upfront costs or inception-related costs to begin, where it may not be as sufficient to look at, connection-based only incentives. So we have typically been now working in more of a front-end component on catalytic grant financing to, start up new country operations, or into new remoter regions and offset those kind of leading losses that will come as you expand or new ventures. I think the other part to consider then is, what are you trying to do? What's the result? I will say, the connection, that's the easiest thing to look at because it's quantifiable, measurable, and tangible. But is that really the full result you're looking at? That's only one thing, like the what. There's kind of the where and who it's going to and how you're factoring those in. Now, when you try and factor those in at individual connection levels and try to scale, it's insanely difficult, right? Not all countries or contexts, or very few, have registered systems for persons with disabilities, poverty, age, and then measuring and quantifying this can become quite difficult. We've taken more approaches into consider it from the market level of like, okay, these areas, and getting more granular as the project progresses, are more challenging, and incentives for this reason are valued in a different way to get the products there. I think the last thing I'd say is there's always the question around how you put valuation on the price, right? Whether it's competitive bidding or set prices or however it's going to be done. And I think that's where maybe how I tend to think about it, instead of just subsidy, is I was like, well, the subsidy side, to me, I look at it as more addressing the demand side. When demand is low and you're trying to get it up, I want a subsidy to reduce the cost of the service, right? And then you're looking at things like the affordability gap, and maybe delivery of that incentive then with technology now and mobile money can be more on a direct basis to the customer themselves, right? And what that would do is limit the price distortion factors. So the customer is still paying the actual delivery cost, right? But that reduction, kind of how we have in energy efficiency programs through North America, you know, when you insulate your house or you know, upgrade your furnace, you get that payment, not the company, upon your acquisition of the product or the service. But the price is still staying normal, but you're getting the incentive directly to yourself. So it doesn't distort the costing. I think that's kind of the problem where we've taken the tendency to channel the price discount through companies, but I'm not convinced of how sustainable that is or how uniform it is, because then it's the cost reductions only channeling through companies that are eligible, able to successfully submit a claim. So it's quite narrow, and then it risks price distortion because you've created this perception amongst the customer that the product is actually this much, rather than that this is the cost of the product, but there is an offer here right now. If I take advantage of it, that I can, you know, get my benefit. It may come a bit later, but it's limiting the price distortion effect in the longer term.
Thank you. That was a very interesting way of looking at it. That, yeah, you're kind of by potentially changing customer perception of the product, that could have some detrimental market effects and kind of limit the availability of other companies to be selling their own products and reaching customers. And I thought what you were saying about how the connection is the what, but you also need to focus on the where and the who, really goes back to Uche's comment earlier on kind of energy justice and like the equity in providing energy access, because, you know, it's not just about getting the connections up, but it's also, you know, reaching underserved populations, reaching people who don't have affordability or don't have access. So I kind of appreciated that comment as well. And I'd also be interested, we do have a question, but I think I might wait till the end for those. And I've just got a couple more questions for the panel, and then I think we can get to questions at the end from the audience. So thinking about off-grid solar companies in supporting productive uses of electricity, which can have very, you know, positive benefits for especially on income and potentially on resilience for last mile customers. So I wonder whether Uche, you could give us a little bit of information on whether in your engagements with companies, you know, what their experiences are of supporting productive uses of energy, and also whether there should be any regulation established that could help incentivize incentivize companies to actually engage in developing productive use of energy products, because we know that there are these significant benefits and potentially have a kind of higher level of energy service than you know, an entry-level solar home system, for instance. So yeah, I'd just be interested to hear your experiences of productive use of energy and how companies are you know, promoting these technologies.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I'll talk about two programs that I've worked on. going back to the NEP, we actually had a productive use appliance component. And that component basically tried to incentivize developers to engage in the business of promoting productive use appliances. There was some subsidies attached to that. I know, as John said, that could lead to market distortion, but let's leave that on one side. The challenge I saw with that is that, as mentioned before, a lot of these developers are smaller, newer companies, and although they're really great at setting up mini grids, distributing solar home systems, they're not productive use companies, right? So it's for right now, I believe that that requires a lot of technical assistance. And so we realized that program took a while to get off its feet. We needed to provide a lot of technical assistance, training, sensitization to both the communities and the developers. Yes, they are gaining experience, but I don't think they have so much experience right now. Although I think a lot of them are eager for productive use to be a part of their mini grids. As I think mentioned before, residential customers alone will not make your mini grid sustainable. You do need that mix of commercial loads, productive loads, to actually create sustainability within the mini grid and increase consumption and utilization of the mini grid. So now switching over to another program where we provide standalone solar home systems, but of higher capacity. So before I'm talking about getting mini grid developers to engage in the business of providing appliances to their customers in mini grids they've already built. Switching gears a bit, there's another, I guess, side to the coin or approach. 100 ways to skin a cat, right? Another approach in a different program was to not provide the appliances, but provide. So this program was called, and it's an SC for All program. It's one that I manage under the UEF. Standalone solar for productive use. So this now, the approach was not to provide the appliances, but to provide energy storage solutions or solar solutions for businesses, SMEs, and other forms of productive use. So this now was more in tune with what I think developers are used to doing, which is providing generation and storage capacity. So we opened the program to developers that were providing these solar kits, but directly to businesses, right? To productive use appliances. And I think we've seen a lot more success with that. One key thing here is that we're not trying to, in this program, we're actually promoting energy as a service, right? So we're not necessarily trying to distort the market by giving a price for the system, but more like providing the developers with some grant funding that reduces their initial capex constraints. Although they will find the upfront capital, but the return period is greatly reduced by them getting a good percentage back in a short period of time from our grant subsidies. And then from that point on, they basically provide a service to the customers, and they pay based on use, either kilowatt hour consumption or sometimes the daily rate, however they've structured their business. And this also provides a level of sustainable and reliability to these projects, because you're no longer just selling systems, right? You're selling a service. A system is a one-off transaction. Maybe it has a warranty for a year or two, and then after which the customer could basically be left out in the cold. But when you promote energy as a service, the developer is in the game, has skin in the game for a longer period of time. If the systems are not functioning, there definitely will be no payment. So the uptime is the most important part for the developer. So just trying to give an example of two programs on opposite sides of the fence, and just to say that they do have experience in this, and I've seen it in both programs, but in both, I think that technical assistance and knowledge sharing is quite important. Thanks.
Thank you. That was really interesting to kind of see the differences between the appliance focused kind of support of productive use versus the actual, solar generation itself being used directly with businesses. Yeah, thank you for those helpful examples. I wonder, Josh, whether you have any experience as well with this, with your work at SMB.
Yeah, increasing area of interest and practice, particularly like you see in communities where like initial access has been achieved, and then it's always like what will come next. I think there was a period, I think, where there's a when it was moving from more of that basic access over like the past 5-10 years and more into productive use, that you could just replace things on a technology level to PUE and whatever else has been done in the past, and things will work wonderfully. And I think the experience is definitely coming out more that that's not strictly the case, right? Like productive use, I think, is a different animal. Like the technology diffusion is going to be lower. It's not every single household is going to use these applications, right? It's so that's going to be narrower at times as well, and you have to consider that. The products are more costly as well, and then there's just the reality of, if we're focusing not just on products and going more to services, we should be considering in kind of results and valuations also is actual productivity. And I don't know if we've wrapped our head around quite so strongly yet how we measure and consider that. And it's just not the energy that's coming out of the service. These are also then about longer term investments in relationships that companies make in communities to ensure systems are productive. It's not just a technology problem, then it's a market problem, supply chain problem, a value chain problem, right? And I think this speaks to the need where like we like things like RBF because we think, well, it's great, it's very quick, to make a payment and we're done, right? But then again, this goes not just to the who and the what of incentives and subsidy valuation, it's the when. And are there means and approaches we can apply to extend and expand the provision of incentives over time to encourage companies to invest and stay in communities in the longer term, where that demand growth then really starts to happen, right? And I think that's the risk where we're looking at rapid scaling to try and meet SDG 7, and there's huge unmet basic access, right? Is that you can definitely design all these things, even in productive use, in a manner that you can more or less create like a grass fire, right? But if we really want true growth and scaling and depth of scaling, right? Then I think we have to also consider like, how are we ensuring that it's not just we're running here and then we're gone and people are left behind? That sustainable companies, operations, and practices in communities are there that have the potential for longer term growth, because I think truly for productive use, the critical ingredient is time.
Thank you. I really appreciated your framing of productive use as not just a technology, but kind of a really long-term embedding in the society and in a community to make sure that there's kind of long-term productive engagement with whether it's a technology or with a business. And very interesting way of looking at that. Thank you. And Julio, I wonder whether you have any comments as well, given your kind of one of the earliest comments that you gave on tier 3 energy access being, the minimum demand that we should be kind of aiming for. I wonder whether you have any comments on that as well, and what regulations you think could support companies in promoting productive use.
I'm not sure that this is a question of regulation, but I think that the OGS companies are mainly only providers of electricity, and they are interested or must be interested in increasing the electricity consumption. It is their own business. But in this case, must be involved in promoting activities directly related with electricity and facilitating access to productive appliances like solar mill, solar water pumps, etc. I had an experience in this aspect that we created a users assistance center and select entrepreneurs which have a little business, and we support this business, providing advice, knowledge, and also some finance in order to provide these appliances. And this is a way to have a certain local development, but then also to help the use of these appliances. But on the other side, I have heard that as somebody said that the OGS companies provide service in the last mile, where there is no many services there. They can be used as direct local economic development actor in other areas, developing and accompanying entrepreneurs in different economic sectors, as tourism, agriculture, etc. For me, this can be a great error. As this activity requires knowledge and experience which are quite different than the electricity supply. So we have to take care with the businesses related and other businesses that require quite different expertise. Nothing to add. Nothing.
Thank you very much. Well, those are all the questions from my side. I realize we're at time now. There is one question for Uche. Ignacio, I will defer to you on whether there's time for Uche to answer it, or whether we should just thank the panelists and maybe you could follow up separately on that.
Well, let's have one.
Okay, great.
And then the others maybe could be taken care of by the panelists themselves, or the answering in the chat, or the team, the ASR or GOGLA team. So let's have one.
Perfect, thank you. So this is a question for Uche from Dennis Lee Oguse. So how can SE4All help developers Far East in the Democratic Republic of Congo benefit from your catalytic role so that licensing and permitting isn't as cumbersome as it is? Secondly, what support do you have for developers, and how do they secure it?
Yeah, sorry, great question. And happy to say that currently the SE4All UEF just recently awarded several grant agreements, or signed several grant agreements with some developers in the DRC. And these about 4 companies will provide close to 19,000 connections in the DRC. So as far as the support for DRC, I think it's already there. As far as how would a developer benefit from this? I think the way the UEF works, we have what we call windows. So we open up a call for applications for a period of time and allow developers to submit their projects to us. We evaluate these projects, assess those that are actually ready to develop these solutions in a short period of time. We check their financials, their technical expertise and background, and then we make a selection of those that we feel are ready to develop these projects in a timely manner. So unfortunately, that window has closed for now, and it's always based on the amount of funding that we have available. We do have several donors that support our efforts, and so the funding is limited at times. So as it comes in, we open up windows and seek for or solicit applications from developers. So I think what you would do is just keep an eye out on the space when additional funding is available and additional windows open. If you're a developer in the DRC, please do apply. and we would love to support your project. Thank you.
Thank you, Uche. And I think I just want to say a huge thank you to the panelists who joined me today. That was a great discussion. And thanks for the question as well, Dennis. So thank you to all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you
Thanks,
very much, Rosalie, for and the panelists for a great discussion. I think that we are leaving, if we consider panel 1 and panel 2, we are leaving a lot of work for the speakers in day 2. I think that we have open questions, we have give partial solutions, but we have also discrepancies that we will have to address. We have been talking about very different business models. On the one side, energy as a service, that has been said that we are moving towards that, but there is a lot of resistance in the consumers that prefer to own the devices. We are also talking about subsidies, and I see different viewpoints. I hear that this off-grid system should be left to the market, but maybe not in these faraway areas. Well, we have 600 million people without electricity. How many of those are in these faraway areas? If we have many millions of them, probably the subsidies have to be a permanent feature that we will have to use, but maybe they are less than that. Some of the solutions provide permanent subsidies that could be established in the tariffs. Some others require programs. We have been listening to opening windows for programs just a few minutes ago. Well, if the programs happen in windows here and there, then maybe lots of people will not be able to, after having a solar home system, to replace that if there is no program that will support that. So I think that there are many important topics. Also, the discrepancies regarding it is very natural what happens with productive uses of electricity, whether the company should get involved in developing demand. And we heard in panel 1 the possibility of providing internet and education and other services related to the products, and we have heard about other ones. So again, is this something that should be in the hands of the suppliers of electricity, or should be done by other companies? And whether regulation has a role? At least regulation has been mentioned to have a role in promoting, demanding, supervising quality of service, also reducing the red tape that the companies have to endure to get their systems in operation. Are there more roles that the regulation should play? So all these are questions that are open for tomorrow, and I hope that you will join us tomorrow for an exciting day in which we will go deeper into the off-grid solar systems. Thank you very much to everyone for attending. Goodbye.